Welcome to Spockcast. This is episode 55. My name is Tim Mitchell, and I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kuline in Mississauga, Ontario.
Hey, how's it going?
And we're also joined by Jaime Lopez Jr. in Mr. and Mrs. Seattle.
How's it going?
Didn't come out quite right, did it?
Mr. and Mrs. Seattle?
Doesn't flow quite as well.
Can we just say home of the Kraken?
Home of the Kraken, yes, right. Ground zero for the coronavirus. In the U.S., that is, I should say. All righty. Okay,
so I guess you're in ground zero for the coronavirus in Canada, just saying.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, yeah, we're getting our readiness plan together, if you know what I'm saying. You probably are at your place, too, I guess, right? Anyway, so as every good corporate citizen should. Mm-hmm. So, digging in, we got some fact check from last week. We were talking about Lone Star and Dark Helmet. I couldn't remember the name of Lone Star, and it was played, of course, by Bill Pullman in the movie of the name of the film of the Spaceballs, right? And the number one, as I referred to him in the same movie, was George Weiner, who played Colonel Sandurz, which is not spelt like that. But you can
What's the matter, Colonel Sandurz? Chicken?
Yes. Chicken? Yeah, okay. So we had a bit of a discussion last week about the emergency medical hologram last week, and so I went back and I watched this bit just again to sort of clarify, because you guys had noticed that he changed accents, and I didn't quite notice it that much. Probably because I come from the British Isles and they kind of all blend together after a while. Anyway.
I just think I just heard a couple million Scotsmen screaming. And
spoilers for tonight's show is that we have a couple new emergency holograms. Anyway, so Rios character, the actor who plays Rios is actually the guy who portrays the holograms. I didn't quite catch that at first, but maybe you guys did. But to me, it just kind of seemed like a strange-looking bearded guy. But it turns out that the emergency medical hologram has a British accent, and because Rios says to him, a little while later, you are an emergency hologram, and we no longer have a navigational emergency. When he's talking to the Irish version, which is the emergency navigation hologram, which you guys were right about, in the fact that those were distinguished that way. So. And they're both placed, like I said, Rios, the emergency medical hologram, and the emergency navigational hologram are all played by Santiago Cabrera, actor. And, of course, we found out today, and spoilers for those of you who haven't seen the show already, but while you're listening to this podcast, we have a couple more incarnations of that, and a little bit of comic humor. But I won't steal that from Jaime. I'll let him lay that joke out for you. We also talked about Hugh, who is the executive director of the Borg Reclamation program. So that's, and I mentioned that, and that you guys didn't catch this, but I did that last week. All of the Romulans are in the disordered ward, is what they call them. I picked up that name from tonight's show, actually, because they mentioned it again on the show, on this week's episode. And I also we were talking about Mr. Spock and how he was able to sometimes stare into bright things, unlike other people. And so the episode I was talking about is There Is No Truth in Beauty, and it was Diane Muldhar who played the Doctor on season 2 of The Next Generation. She was in Star Trek, the original series, twice. I think the first time she was as Dr. Miranda Jones, and she's the keeper of Kolos. And in that episode, Kirk and McCoy discovers that she's actually blind, and that's why she's able to deal with this entity Kolos who nobody can look at because you'll go blind. And at one point during the show, he wants to inhabit Spock's body. And of course, Spock volunteers to do that because it's kind of a variation on the mind meld. Puts on a red visor, has Kronos take over his body. But a little while later, when Kronos is actually going to go back into his box, he doesn't put the visor back on. So Spock ends up looking into Kronos and going temporarily blind. And I think, Jaime, was that the one episode you were thinking of where Spock had this sort of special eyelid or whatever?
Yeah, that was my vague memory of him having, he's not, blinded for the rest of his life because Vulcans have this other eyelid.
Defense, yeah. All right, and then, Jonathan, you have a follow-up as well?
Yeah, You had brought up, Tim, you were asking about sort of where certain things will end up from going from the movie theater in 2019 to where they're going to end up on streaming services. And we talked about Jojo Rabbit as one of the examples. So I took a quick look to see where Jojo Rabbit was made. It was made by Fox Searchlight, which was one of the subsidiaries of Fox, 20th Century Fox. And, of course, like many other things, that's been snapped up by Disney. So...
good.
I don't think Jojo Rabbit is likely to turn up on Disney Plus because it does seem a little, I don't know. I haven't seen the film, but it seems to be a little less family friendly. It's about Nazis. I don't know. Maybe it is. But I wonder if that might show up on a different platform or where it's going to turn up, because it doesn't seem to fit the milieu of Disney Plus. I don't think, Jaime, maybe you can correct us. Hulu doesn't really get movies like that, does it?
I don't think so, but I also don't know what the strategy is going to be and how it's going to evolve for Hulu. Because like you're right, like I can't really see Hitler's face right next to the Mickey Mouse icon on Disney Plus, right? That doesn't seem likely. So it's got to go somewhere.
Well, they do have some controversial films. Like I've noticed on the Disney Channel that they do have, Disney Plus I should say, they do have some, like not, like more adult kind of material, like questionable material, I guess. They have all the Avengers stuff, for instance, right? You don't want your 4-year-old, maybe you do want your 4-year-old running around watching that stuff, but most people don't, right? So it's hard to say whether they'll actually pick this one up. What's an interesting note to it, I don't know if we put this in the show anywhere, but I don't know if you guys have heard that Amazon has been going around taking all the swastikas off of the Man in High Place, the Man in the High Castle material. Not the actual show.
Off of the promotional material?
Yeah, like I heard that they were taking the posters and any kind of advertising for this. So I went around looking for Man in High Castle on Amazon Prime and stuff like that, but I hadn't seen any evidence of that. But I thought it was an interesting story that they're doing that, right?
Yeah. Well,
especially since it's a pivotal part of the story, right?
Yeah. Although, again, I think you could. Yeah, I wonder how you promote. I mean, yeah, I wonder how you promote that without that, because that's sort of that's the shtick of the thing, is right. What if the Nazis won?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
and it's not the first show like that. Wasn't there a movie like that once, too, with Rutger Hauer or something like that? Or?
Yeah, I feel like that's been done. I mean, I think that the whole idea of, like, the path not taken is pretty prevalent in science fiction writing, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think there is a real special place, point taken about more mature content. The Hitler and the Nazi imagery is treated very specially. At the very least, I'm speaking about this from an American standpoint, cannot speak for any other countries. And I think it will be largely a matter of time, because there are still people alive today who suffered through that regime. And I think I had mentioned an episode or two ago when asked about, the 9/11 thing, like that's still meaningful to me. But pretty soon there will be people behind me who it won't be meaningful to, just like Pearl Harbor is not super meaningful to me other than as a historic event. So I think time might change some of those feelings there, but I don't know. It's hung around for so long, and there are people who, don't want to see that imagery. And I think that's why Amazon is probably a little bit more careful with it than they might be with other things. Who knows? Yeah. But I think that's where it's coming from.
Interesting, too, I was just thinking about this, is that Home Alone 2 has been on TV quite a lot lately, and obviously because it's a Christmassy movie, and it was just replaying the other day, and I happened to catch the scene where I was just doing some channel surfing, and I saw the scene where Kevin McAllister goes up the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
And he's at the top of the World Trade Center, looking through the microscope or binoculars there, so... Mm-hmm. Something you're not going to... You'll have to explain to somebody what that scene is in the future, right?
Well, and there's a scene with now U.S. President Donald Trump, right, as well in that movie where he's trying to come out of the hotel and he runs into Trump. I cannot recall the context, so I'm sure we can.
Yeah, it was something about if you want to film in Trump Tower, I have to be in the movie was the story.
Yeah, and then apparently over the holidays, the CBC broadcast that movie and cut the Trump portion out.
Yeah, they claim it was to get it in to shorten the movie to get in like they cut a few scenes out of the movie. In order
to get it to fit in with commercial time, right?
But that's a good story too, though.
Yeah, well, you'd have to think somewhere in there that a CBC editor was having there had to be an in-joke there too, right?
Yeah,
ha ha ha! I just cut the U.S. president out of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I always thought it was a funny scene anyway, to be honest with you. I mean, not funny, peculiar to have in a movie. But.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Let's do some headlines.
Yeah, I feel like I knew this one was coming. I really wish I'd said it on the show so it'd be for the record. But the Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn is quite the name. And usually it's shortened to just Birds of Prey, and it turns out that doesn't market too well. People are like, "What's this Birds of Prey? Wasn't that like a TV show like a while ago?" So now they have renamed it to Harley Quinn Birds of Prey because people know who that is, especially because of Margot Robbie's portrayal of the character. So in this article they make reference to Edge of Tomorrow, also known as Live, Die, Repeat, that also suffered from a name that didn't really explain the concept so well and doesn't, sort of catch you like Live, Die, Repeat. Like, oh, what's that movie about, right? Yeah, I even trolled y'all in our own private Slack channel on what's this movie in this magazine that I saw at the grocery store. I don't know what that movie is. Birds of Prey. Nobody's heard of that.
That's right. Well, as the fine owner of 150 Birds of Prey comic books, I guess I'm the one they were targeting, and yet I still haven't gone and seen it either. It's a good strategy, I guess. Last I heard, they had made the change in the United States, but they hadn't made it here. I don't know if that has happened now, but it's kind of a strange thing. I mean, the marketing for it has been very Harley centric, very Margot Robbie centric. So even just recognizably, you'd think that would have clicked, but apparently not. So, you want to do the next one, Tim? I think you get bragging rights on the next one.
Oh, yeah, I called it. Well, no, I mean, in the same way that I thought Hillary Clinton would win the American election last year or 2 years ago, or whenever it was, 3 years ago.
Yep.
I was hoping that Parasite would do well. I still think it was one of the better movies, if not the best movie I saw last year. I saw it at the Toronto Film Festival, and I don't remember how I got a ticket. I think it was like a last-minute purchase, because I was having a real hard time getting tickets because I got in late to the festival. But yeah, it was amazing when I saw it, and I haven't seen it. I saw it the one time, and even still, just in that one viewing, and you know how I feel about movies with subtitles. I mean, not that I have anything against foreign films. It's just I find it tiresome to have to read subtitles when you're trying to pay attention to what's on the screen. But yeah, this was a really great movie, and amazing that it won. Not only, I think it won 3 or 4 Oscars.
4, yeah.
4, like it won adapted screenplay, I think, right, or original screenplay.
Yep.
It won Best Director.
Yep.
It
Best
won
International Film.
Best International Film, which is a renaming for this year to sort of, rather than just call it foreign film, which is kind of a not quite fair. Mm-hmm. And then went into win Best Film of all, right? So, or best film of the year, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the last time I saw a movie like that was like that the one with Kim Basinger, American something or other, Russell Crowe, and
L.A. Confidential.
L.A. Confidential, thank you. That's the one. Yeah.
Yes, L.A. Confidential is a great movie. I love that one.
Yeah. So, but what I meant was like when I came out of the movie, I kind of thought, this is a really good movie. Just like that kind of was a really good movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, what do you guys think?
Again, having not seen Parasite, I don't really have an opinion on that, although I think I'm grateful for the fact that, it does seem like a progressive step, so kudos for that. I think it's worth mentioning also a couple of the other winners, particularly one we talked about here, that Joaquin Phoenix won for his performance, best actor for The Joker. And that was sort of the big sort of genre comic booky thing that happened as well, and then gave a very serious speech. It's very serious, that guy. It's a very serious actor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think I mentioned at the time that it is worth seeing the movie. I found, I found it a little bit, the Joker trope. Now that we've had, Heath Ledger, obviously phenomenal performance, and then Jared Leto as well, right?
And Jack Nicholson's performance is pretty iconic too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so they you can even throw Cesar Romano into that mix too, right? But
Romero.
Sorry.
And his mustache too.
And his mustache too, but so winning an Oscar for that style of performance, I mean, it was a good performance, but it was a bit like, and maybe it was part of Todd Phillips' sort of style, because he does sort of mirror Scorsese's, King of Comedy in a sense too. There's a little bit of that in there. Have you seen the movie yet, John?
No.
Okay.
It's all on my to-do list.
Yeah, I mean, it was great to see it in the theater, because there's some really, panoramic, spectacular shots that are in the movie, like very well, laid out kind of thing. Somebody pointed out that his dance on the stairs is very similar to Bono in Zoo TV.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, you remember how the character, I forget what he called that guy with the
Fly.
The glasses.
Didn't he call him the Fly?
The Fly, yeah. When he comes out at the beginning of the show and he's waving his arms and kicking his feet up in the air. That's the same. If you look at the dance that he does in Zoo TV concert tour, the Joker does the same thing. So it's kind of so. Anyway, maybe are they paying tribute to that? I don't know. But
interesting.
Have you seen the Joker yet, Hame?
I have, and it's a very strange film because I don't know how well it plays as a superhero movie, because it's very non-traditional that way. It's definitely not an uplifting movie. It's a very, very sad movie, watching somebody's descent into madness. And I do think that Joaquin Phoenix did a real solid job with that. And so I definitely agreed with the best actor for my own personal preferences.
Yeah, it is definitely a good movie from that point of view. And I guess I mean, it kind of got hammered from Scorsese in terms of that, or I think it was Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola, I think, were saying that they didn't think these comic book movies were real movies, sort of things. But, I mean, Jonathan's been telling me for years since I met him that, that graphic novels are to be taken seriously, right? So, and they are, right?
Well, at a point, you've got to respect the writing is good writing, whether it's good writing for a comic book, good writing for a magazine, good writing for a newspaper, good writing for a novel. It's good writing. What's the difference about filmmaking, right? If you put talented people in good roles, the cream will rise.
Right.
So I did see Parasite. I definitely recommend people watch that.
So I'm curious, did you see it in English or did you see it with subtitles?
No, subtitled. I prefer original language and subtitles.
Yeah, I wonder, because I've seen some commercials for it where they've dubbed the voices, they've dubbed it over with an English-speaking voice, right? Which
is that just for commercial purposes, though?
Maybe to get people into this, because I mean, I think they did mention at the Oscars. I think maybe one of the acceptance speeches that it's amazing that people are actually accepting of a movie that is in its native tongue, right, and with subtitles.
Yeah,
I mean, it's funny because I mean, even still, like I remember watching it in the theater, and everybody kind of getting the joke at the same time, even though it was out of time with the actual performance on screen, right? Like if somebody said something funny, everybody kind of read it at the same speed or whatever, and we all kind of guffawed at the same time. So it was very, that whole tribal movie going experience still worked even with the subtitles, right? So
yeah.
I'm curious because I know that Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon which also won for Best Picture, I believe, right? Didn't it?
I was under the impression
the sound of three men reaching for their phones.
Anyway, you guys look it up. But I remember in the theater I saw that a couple of times in the theater, and that was in the original Mandarin and
won for Best International Feature Film or Best Foreign Film at that point, but didn't win Best Picture.
Okay. So, but it did win an Oscar, but which is what I remember. But when it came out on DVD, you could switch it over to English, so you could understand the language without having to read the subtitles, right? So, because that again was another amazing visual movie with good story, right? But and Captain Giorgio was in that one.
She was.
Yeah.
Parasite to me, when people have asked me, I said, all right, the best way I can describe the filmmaking is acknowledge the fact that it's not a horror film per se, but imagine if Jordan Peele was Korean. And it has that sort of feel to it. Like it would fit, in a 3 DVD box with Us and Get Out.
Yeah, and Bong Joon-ho's, we've talked on this pod before about Snowpiercer, right? Like that, you could see that this person was a very talented filmmaker. Like he didn't come out of nowhere.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. Edgar Wright also posted on Twitter, and maybe I'll find a link for the show notes, but he posted on Twitter saying, it's not, it is a great movie, obviously, but he listed a whole bunch of Korean films that you should go back and watch, right? Just to sort of see how their whole industry has grown up over the last while. He lists maybe 12 or 13 over a series of 3 or 4 tweets, and I don't know about you, but I respect Edgar Wright's opinion a lot, so.
The other thing that I wanted to say that was interesting that I picked up on that you were talking about there, Tim, was the renaming of the award to Best International Feature Film.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It seems strange to me because that feels like it's less descriptive of what the award is than foreign film.
Well,
I understand people are getting probably kind of hung up on the word foreign and foreigner, I suppose.
So here's my question to you then. Does that mean that an American film could win that award?
That was going to be my lawyer moment of is the United States not international or considered as part of international? I mean, your international is less descriptive.
You have an International House of Pancakes too. Come on.
Yeah. Like, all right. So foreign film, foreign sounds, I suppose, offensive to some, but I'm like, it is foreign to Hollywood. That's sort of the idea there, right? Like, I don't know. I feel like they need to rename it again to something, non-Hollywood film. So they should just call it
so
that.
going back.
What about the stuff they filmed in Toronto? Is that still a Hollywood film?
Yeah.
Where
I
does
guess
the
it depends
producer
on where the
live?
money comes from.
Yeah, well, but even then, there are people who are financing movies.
Our Canadian government finances movies.
Well, that's
it.
And
media
there's Chinese nationals who are funding a lot of movies right now, right?
Yeah,
True.
yeah. I mean, come on.
I mean, you'll get no argument here that maybe the 10-cent funded movies shouldn't qualify. Like Transformers and other things. Like maybe they shouldn't qualify. They should be shoved into that international feature film category.
Well, it's sort of along the same lines of I think I was sure at one point that they dropped Best Actress as a title, or they were talking about it because it's kind of Best Actor who happens to be a woman, kind of role.
Yeah, I think it's a terminology has certainly been spreading. There are a lot of women in Hollywood who refer to themselves as actors now.
Yes,
but
exactly. And comedian.
Comedian versus comedian, and all the sort of gender appropriated things. But I don't think they've made any official changes at that level. But right. Yeah, I was thinking that as I was watching the thing, the Oscars the other night, I was thinking, I wonder if we would ever get to a point in time where gender just doesn't become a factor and we nominate the 10 best performances. I mean, really, what happens if down the road we end up with people who are, non-binary gendered?
True.
It gets really tricky, and it'll be good if we ever get to that point as a society. The unfortunate near-term consequence if they ever dissolved it, or I guess combined it into a singular Best Actor award, is I would worry that we'd end up with the same situation we had this year with Best Director, where no women were nominated. Right?
Yeah, I guess you could expand the category too. Yeah, you could expand the category like they did with the Best Picture too. Instead of having 5 Best Actors and 5 Best Actresses, you could have 10 best actors and have them be of whatever gender they identify as.
Right.
But they tried that in the previous years where they had multiple, 10 movies were nominated for Best Picture, and that was just a nightmare, right? In terms of which one could possibly win.
Well,
like
I mean,
you said,
the expansion that they did, right? They expanded from, it was 5 Best Picture nominees, and then there was a lot of blowback because they weren't nominating anything that anybody outside of, Hollywood were really watching a lot of. They weren't nominating mainstream films, and so they expanded it to up to 10 just so that they could include the Dark Knights and things like that to appease the masses. But then how many of those movies have won since then? Like one?
Yeah, it was a nutty overreaction of like 5 might have left who got snubbed on the borderline ones, but you needed like 6 or 7 total to accommodate for that. You really didn't need 10.
Yeah, and they don't have to do 10. It's up to 10. So there's been years where it's 10 and there's years where it's 9 and whatever. But it's Hollywood branding too, right? That way on, that many on demands and Apple, iTunes and all the other services, you can say it was an Oscar nominated picture. Really, Oscars is really just a brand, right?
True.
It's a brand of quality, I think. Can we say that is a brand of quality? I guess it's a reputable brand.
Well, yeah, I think that's probably in Joaquin Phoenix's acceptance speech. He kind of questioned, what the whole Academy, not naming the Academy, but naming the people who in that room who have the voices, as he said, to lift and make change in society, right? Like, I think he was sort of alluding to the fact that there weren't any women directors nominated. Mm-hmm. There weren't a lot of actors of color involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and also Chris Rock's classic line in his non-host thing where he talked about the fact that the vaginas are missing, right?
That's right. There's something missing from all the directors this year. Vaginas.
Yeah, vaginas. Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, I guess we'll leave it with this one too. A friend of mine told me this joke today, which I hadn't heard till, and it took me a minute, of course, because I'm slow. That even though the Oscars had no host this year, Parasite still won.
Bravo.
I think I told it wrong, but whatever. You get the idea. All right, let's move on to.
Staying with an Oscar theme, just a couple more things that were interesting notes. So this one I thought was really interesting, and this just came from a tweet, which I thought was really, astute. But it pointed out that Avengers Endgame obviously was the biggest blockbuster last year. It was not lauded greatly from the Oscars. It was considered obviously a popcorn movie, but it was nominated for Best Visual Effects. Which it lost to 1917, which I have not seen 1917, and I do want to see that. It does look like an excellent movie, but I did find that somewhat surprising. But in losing that, it became the highest grossing movie of all time that didn't win a single Oscar. And so any movie that has come out and claimed the title of highest grossing film of all time. And, there's a list here and we'll have it in our show notes. Gone with the Wind, Sound of Music, Godfather, Jaws, Star Wars, E.T., Jurassic Park, Titanic, Avatar, all 9 of those that came out in the year they came out, zoom to the top of the all-time box office list, they all won at least one Oscar. And Avengers Endgame, right, which is now the all-time highest grossing movie, won none.
Wow, crazy.
Yeah, I honestly, I can't. Again, I'm sure the effects for 1917 are fantastic. Sam Mendes is a great filmmaker, and I expect the quality to be very high. But man, some of those scenes at Endgame, it's amazing to think that wasn't the winner, because some of those scenes were dazzling.
Yeah, there was not one visible guy wire or piece of 2x4 pushing out somebody, like there was, like from that, they were visually stunning, every single scene, right?
Yep. It did. It's the closest thing I've ever seen to like a comic book come to life. Like those scenes towards the end when it's sort of the good versus evil, and they're just these two armies coming at each other, and that it's obviously large portions of it are computer generated. It's breathtaking. Anyways, I thought that was an interesting note. And this is the other thing that I saw from the Oscars that made me just laugh. So the day after the Oscars, many people were online pointing out that Kelly Marie Tran had a little intro to do when she was on the Oscars. And they added it up, and she actually had more lines in the Oscars than she did in the Star Wars Episode 9.
Mm-hmm.
And she was on screen in the Oscars for maybe a minute, which is really funny. And they said the timing was actually pretty close, too. She actually she was on 80 seconds of Star Wars Episode 9.
Right.
And,
wow.
Yeah. So, again, it's obviously, it's a little bit catty to point that out, but I thought that was a really funny follow-up to people saying, it's funny that this actress who kind of got hacked out of Star Wars got more screen time when she came to present an Oscar.
Well, it's funny that because you're right. Immediately, as soon as I saw her, I thought, "Oh, there she is! She's actually on the show." And after what happened at the Star Wars Oscars, but yeah. All right, she didn't get a medal either, though, but I just want to point that out.
Yeah, they'll rectify that in 42 years.
Yeah. All right, what's next?
I got another one here with so Sony is still continuing to produce Marvel-related movies. They, of course, own the rights to Spider-Man and associated characters. And while they have a deal to continue to put Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they are pushing forward with other movies. They have Morbius, which is a vampire character from Spider-Man that's going to be coming out later this summer, speaking of Jared Leto. And they're also going to have Venom 2 later this year. It's coming out in October. But they announced this week that they put a movie on their slate for October 8th, 2021, and they have not said what it is. So we know that in July of 2021, so that's obviously next summer, they're going to be putting out the third Spider-Man movie that they've co-created with Marvel Cinematic Universe, sequel to Spider-Man Far From Home. And now we've got this other one on the slate, but they haven't said what it is. So this has got lots of people speculating on what from that universe they might do next. A couple things that I've heard and my own speculation. So they've talked about doing Black Cat, Silver Sable. They've talked about doing Sinister Six, which is Spider-Man's villains. And I wonder if it might be a sequel to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So either way, interesting that this is sort of this hold in your calendar for next October. Wondering what that'll be.
So this is 2020 this is coming out?
No, 2021. 2020 they have Morbius and Venom 2. And then next year they've got Spider-Man 3, new Spider-Man 3, and then they've got whatever this is.
Right, gotcha. All right.
And any wish list items, Jaime?
Yeah, I went down the Sinister Six route, and I was thinking that Doc Ock, especially if it hinted at all at the superior Spider-Man as a possible future. Maybe Vulture. And then I ran short because I was like, I don't think you really do anything with like Rhino. I don't think you can hold a whole movie,
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder what they're going to do. I personally, again, my wish list is top of my wish list is a sequel to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. That was a mind-blowingly good movie, I thought.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too, but I'm not.
Well, the problem is those kind of movies take a while too, so that might be a little ambitious to get that out by next fall. I think we might be looking at 2022 just because it takes a while to make something of that caliber.
Okay.
And the last thing I've got in here is that we've got another main actor hired to be on Marvel's Disney Plus series Loki, Gugu Mbatha Raw, who is on the morning show on Apple Plus. Apple Plus, is that it?
Right.
Plus is going to be joining the cast. Obviously, starring alongside Tom Hiddleston is going to be Loki, and we talked about last week. Owen Wilson is obviously signed on as well. Wow. And so, yeah, we've got another star. It'll be interesting to see who they have her playing. There's no listed person who she's going to be. So it'll be interesting to see who they're going to make her do. Fans of our world will probably remember her from the San Junipero episode of Black Mirror.
Okay. It's Apple TV Plus, by the way.
Apple
those
TV
yelling
Plus.
At your phones.
Apple TV Plus, sorry. My apologies.
Yeah. So I could say something about the morning show relative to her, but I won't spoil it for people who haven't seen it yet.
That would probably be best.
Yes, let's put it that way. Okay. Jaime, got something?
Yeah, I'm so glad that I saw this while I was eating dinner tonight. So the new teaser video has come out with Robert Pattinson's Batman. So we got our first look of him in the Batsuit.
Really? Isn't there sort of an age requirement for Batman?
Well, I suppose it depends what they do, right? Because I was thinking this would be like Batman Year One kind of era, where like he's just getting started out, maybe.
And Pattinson's not as young as I think we think he is. I mean, he's got to be in his 30s. Like what?
That's what I mean. Like so when Keaton and Kilmer and Clooney and those guys all played Batman, were they all sort of roughly around the same age, or?
I think so. I mean, there certainly have been older ones. I mean, Ben Affleck's in his 40s for sure, and he was Batman as recently as 2 years ago.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, I don't think there's necessarily an age limit, although the talk was for this version of it that they were going to do more sort of the Dark Knight detective, a little more sort of back to that era. It seems obviously unlikely that that's what they're doing given this, but...
Interesting.
Yeah, trying to describe how the thing looks. So it looks like more like body armor, a little bit more like obvious plating that makes up the suit. The cowl is not like fully integrated down into the cape. There's actually a little bit of a collar, it looks like, when you look at it. And fans who are much more astute than I have pointed out that the bat symbol that's on the chest, one, I should say it doesn't have like a head. It's kind of more stylized. It's more like just the wings sort of sense. And people have pointed out that there is a Batman story in the comic books, and I think it's called Manufacture for Use, which shows Batman taking the actual gun that killed his parents, melting it down or destroying it and turning it into the symbol on his chest that would protect him.
Yeah, we talked about that. That was from the Detective Comics 1000 issue that came out last year. Kevin Smith wrote that.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah, it to me, when I looked at the pictures and the little video that they put online, it's about a 1 minute video. It's dark. It's not crystal clear, but it looks very much more like that sort of throwback style. It looks very sort of 1940s noir sort of era kind of version of that. Again, I think, well, obviously we'll see more of it, but I don't have any objections. There's no nipples. I think that's a win.
That's a huge win.
Did I ever tell you the story that when I was 6 was the first time I ever saw television, and it was in my grandfather's house, and I was only allowed to watch one TV show a week?
They were ahead of their time.
Huh?
They were ahead of their time.
Batman? Sorry.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, I chose Batman. Adam West's Batman was the show I chose to watch. I think I must have seen other shows, or because I knew about the Thunderbirds and stuff like that at the time too. But yeah, that was my you're allowed to watch one show. This is it. Yeah, a long time ago.
Jaime's right though. It's the pioneers in limiting screen time.
Alrighty, so here we are. The main purpose of this show is to talk about this week Star Trek Picard, Season 1, Episode 4, Absolute Candor. And so this week, I think Jaime is going to do the play-by-play, and Jonathan and I will do the color interruptible commentary.
Yeah, feel free to jump in. You guys will see where I'm at. So we start out this episode 14 years ago on planet Vashti in the Beta Quadrant, which is the...
It's significant they always start 14 years ago, you know?
It's got a lot of... show you in a flashback what happened so you understand the relevance for the current time. So they set us there in the Beta Quadrant on planet Vashti in the Romulan relocation hub, where Picard visits a Romulan nunnery that houses a young boy named Elnor. They have a little bit of, reconnection there. It's clear that they know each other. And a quote that I have here is about promises are prisons, when Elnor asks for a very specific sort of favor from Picard. And we see some more of Picard's relationship with the child, where He teaches the boy to fence, and we've also learned that the Candor part is very similar in my head to the Divergent series. If anybody's ever read those books or seen the movies, where unlike typical Romulan culture that's like all about secrecy, just like Laris told us about in a previous episode, these folks live quite the opposite, where everything is out there in the open. If they have a thought, they will think it and say it directly to you. Thus the absolute candor. So it's in this sort of scenes where Picard learns about the attack by the synths. And so he has to leave to deal with the fallout of that. And it's a huge bummer for Elnor, who, from what we can tell, sort of seems to have this father figure-like attachment to Picard. Even though, as one of the nuns says, Picard doesn't like children. He finds them this huge bother, right? Yeah. And then we switch to the present day, where Rios and Jurati are on La Sirena, and they're chatting about, hey, it's kind of weird you like these paper books. What are you reading? I used to live with a guy who liked books, and it was my father. And Rios apparently is reading a book that sounds pretty depressing. It's about the existential pain of the consciousness of death. So a real light reading right before bed, I'm sure. And then next we see Picard entering the holomatrix, where it kind of looks like he's at the chateau, but it's all just a holographic illusion. And we meet the Mr. Hospitality hologram, which has a distinct southern accent. So this is another version of Rios as hologram that has a different accent. So I think, unlike the last time where we were a little unsure between EMH and ENH, if we heard it correctly, and the differences between British and Irish accents, the southern accent definitely stuck out. And I think right there I was like, all right, this is going to be a thing. There's a theme here with all of these different like self avatars that have different voices. And somewhere in here in my notes, I put that Raffi, Rios, Jurati, and Picard discussed the insane idea of going to Vashti. So Raffi's totally against it, and he's like, "What are you doing? That's not a good idea." Rios points out that there's a pirate or brigand of some sort who's named Candor, who got a hold of an antique bird of prey, Romulan bird of prey that would be, and is running wild, so causing a little bit of trouble, stirring up stuff in space. And we learn more about they quote the Romulan rebirth movement. Mm-hmm. I don't recall if that was ever solidified anywhere here, but they at least
they're sort of anti-Federation kind of group, I think. Like the logic extremist kind of idea.
That was the impression I got. Did they distinctly point out to individuals or what this was about? No,
they just talked about some of the dangers of going to this now abandoned.
Yeah, it's the relocation hub. Yeah,
relocation. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah,
yeah, and they don't make express reference to it, but they do make a point later in the episode when Picard sees a group of sort of armed men of highlighting that the insignia that they have on their shoulder,
right,
which
yeah.
I think that is supposed to be the tip of signifying these are members of that movement.
Right.
And the other thing they mentioned in their Jaime is that this territory, while it also has the Warlord, is Fenris Rangers territory. But they never really express what the Fenris Rangers are, although they mention them a few times in this episode as sort of the protectors of this area, this territory of space.
Right. And we also learned that the nuns we saw before are actually Romulan warrior nuns, Qowat Milnat, or something similar. It was really hard to catch the name.
Qowat Malat. Qowat Malat.
Qowat Malat, yeah.
And apparently those warrior nuns are enemies of the Tal Shiar.
Right.
So that's an interesting little bit of history that I'm sure will come to play as we go through things. Then we switch scenes altogether and locations altogether, and we're back on the Borg cube and the Reclamation project. And Soji's watching a video of Ramda, the individual she went to go meet last time, who was previously Borgified and not anymore, but as Tim pointed out, was in the, what did you call it? What kind of ward was it? Disordered ward?
Yeah. Yeah, disordered.
And Ramda is talking about something that's basically the equivalent of, the end of the world, Ragnarok. I think they call it Ganmadan, the annihilation of all life.
Yep. The day of annihilation.
Right. So even more sort of, mystery and intrigue around this prophecy and how it relates in any way sort of to the synths.
And they make another reference to the term the Destroyer, too, which we heard last episode.
Yeah, and I wish I typed down the name. It was like, it's not Icheb from Voyager, but it's a very similar sounding name. It's like Cheb something.
I think I have it written down from last week's episode. We call it
the Cheb Yub.
Oh yeah, you are the Webchineb. Webchineb.
Yeah, Webchineb. Yes, that sounds similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she makes the same reference where she says this day of annihilation will be brought about by the Destroyer, and that makes Soji's ears perk up, having just been accused of being said Destroyer.
Yeah. So we come back to the crew of La Sirena, and they've arrived at Vashti, which has a security grid that was what's purchased. So it's keeping folks out except for very small windows that allow for communication and possibly transport. Apparently, using Picard's name did not impress the people of Vashti at all. And they were like, no, go away. We're not going to let you in. But it's implied that maybe they could bribe someone. And I'm not clear if that's what happened here, because Picard just beams his way straight up in there. So
yeah, they did say you need a cash gift might go a long way.
Yeah, so they implied but didn't actually show any sort of, greasing of palms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Such as it may be.
I think the smile on Rios' face is supposed to indicate that was the solution.
Right. So Picard, kind of tries to say hello to people in Romulan and isn't getting a whole lot of love, and he sees the aforementioned people hanging out at like a Romulans only cafe, and Picard goes to see the nuns, and he meets a now much older grown man, young man, Elnor, and that's all I wrote about that scene, because now we switch back over to the cube. And we see Ramda unconscious there, and Soji's attending, and Narek comes along and schemes and woos, as he is wont to do. And he and Soji end up doing ritualistic Borg ice skating on one sort of weird, very cold, I suppose, slick area of the cube.
Are they supposed to be like sliding on their socks like kids do?
Sock sliding. Yeah.
Sock
I guess
sliding,
it's ice skating, but it's probably more like ice dancing, I guess, would be more appropriate, since the Olympics are the wrong Olympics, but the Olympics nevertheless are coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And this gets to kind of an interesting point of like who knows what here, where Narek, who's Romulan, points out that it's kind of weird that humans have normal passenger manifest stuff is like clear and open, and hey, this ship called the Ellison that you supposedly boarded some years ago, you weren't on the manifest. So he's like, what are you talking about? I totally remember doing that. And I think we know, right, that that it would make sense that she wasn't on there, because she was born roughly 3-ish years ago, right? And everything she knows about herself and all her memories are a lie to her. But it seems like Narek, not only knows that, but is sort of poking and prodding at the, how much does she know about her true self sort of thing.
It's a couple of good little moments in that scene, too, where she starts with the two of them sitting down together, and she's sitting there with Ramda, right? And she says, when Ramda looked at me, I felt seen. And then he puts his hand on hers and delivers the most cheesy line, "I see you, Soji." Which, ladies, if any dude ever says that to you, run. Just run the opposite direction. And then she afterwards says, she sort of is trying to figure out who he is and what his deal is. And she says, you come and go as you please. You get to do whatever you want. Are you Tal Shiar? And he says, no. And she says, well, if you were Tal Shiar, would you still say no? And he says, yes. And of course, it's the perfect lie, because he's Jaap Vaj, not Tal Shiar, right? You ask the wrong question, you get the wrong answer.
Right.
But yeah, Indeed. Some interesting little it pays off a little bit further again in this episode too, where we're supposed to think that he is playing her and she's the ingenue, but clearly they're kind of both playing each other a little bit too.
Right. As his sister points out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That will
sister in air quotes, because we haven't really established that that's true either.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's sister or what. But it's a little gross, is what it is.
So we go back into space, or I guess a different part of space, and you get warning that the Bird-of-Prey Candor is coming. So things need to hurry up real quick. I think here is probably where Picard learns that Elnor and the nunnery, which is supposed to be all women warriors, he'll never be one of them because he's a man, but he is effectively one in terms of his ability to fight and being just sort of a awesome fighter in general. It's time to roll, but there's like 7 minutes between now and the next window that it can open up for folks to be beamed out. So Picard decides to go cause some trouble at the saloon is what it felt like, right?
Kicks down the sign and stomps on it, yeah.
Yeah, and he comes in and he goes and sits down. He's like, hey, waiter, bring me some stuff, and oh, hey, how's it going? And this one former Romulan senator comes over and explains, I saw you. I saw you when you came and spoke to the Senate and talked about how the magnanimous Federation was going to help us, and then they didn't, and you punked out, and things are looking bad for Picard. The Romulans, buddies there surround Picard, and they've all got swords, and we're gonna sword fight, which Picard, initially refuses, but they throw the blade in such a way that he has basically no choice but to catch it or watch it bounce off his face, and Picard does a little bit of fencing swordplay, as we know the character is skilled in, but he's a much older man, so he's definitely not in a good way here. And so Elnor shows up and saves the day by just straight up ninja murdering a couple guys, including the main Romulan senator guy, just beheading the guy, and in really good detail. His skin. Sorry, not his skin. His blood was green as it sort of oozed out when his head fell off.
Well, he did give the guy a chance. He said, stand down or you're going to die, and the guy doesn't, and Elnor feels he has no choice but to lop his head off, right?
It's true.
Takes his head off and then says, I regret your choice. Yeah. That was a great line. I regret your choice.
I'm not paying $5.99 a month to see you guys talk it out and have feelings. No, I want to see a guy get ninja.
Katana chopped across the neck.
Yeah. So Elnor is now bonded to Picard as Kalinkar, which was brought up earlier. That the nun warrior group, they bond themselves to a worthy sort of journey. Which I guess I overlooked the fact that Picard had tried to convince Elnor earlier, talking about Lieutenant Commander Data, and basically sort of recapping the story as we know it so far, and trying to convince him that, hey, this is a worthy cause. We get Spot, Data's orange cat, name dropped, so that was kind of nice to hear that.
And as you'd expect, Elnor's a little PO'd that he was left behind and storms off, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a theme so far in this series that Picard really dropped the ball with regard to maintaining friendships and connections. It seemed like when he left Starfleet, he more or less closed himself off from everybody except the Tal Shiar buddies on the chateau. Is what it feels like. Like he didn't follow up with folks that he could have very well and reasonably followed. And people call him out, they're like, dude, are you only here because you need me? You haven't said anything to me for years. Rafi said something very similar. Elnor is pointing it out. And speaking of Elnor, when he and Picard get beamed up just in time, because swords don't do, what is it? Blasters? No,
Disruptors.
Disruptors, yeah.
God, I'm trying to remember. It's trying to be cute with the Han Solo quote. That's very appropriate here. Of kooky weapons.
I'll take a good disruptor in a fight any day.
Yeah.
Strange hokey religions can't be replaced by a good blaster at your side or something.
Exactly.
Yeah. And once they get beamed aboard, Elnor just gets reprimanded by Picard of like, you shouldn't have killed this guy. You didn't have to do that.
Without my permission, pretty much.
Yeah, that's not the way we're going to do it.
Sit, roll over.
Yeah. And we find out, because Jurati ends up getting a little bit of a funny moment here, finding out like, hey, so what's the reason which our journey here is considered worthy? It's like, well, this particular group only binds themselves to a lost cause.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, not exactly the answer she was hoping for.
Yeah, it doesn't exactly, pep you up in the morning sort of thing.
No.
Then we switch over to Narek, who's asleep and who gets disturbed out of said sleep by his sister. They have some conversation about, hey, what the heck's going on? Like, you need to hurry it up. This robot, talking about Soji, like she's the Ichib Yub. I forgot what we called that. Should have written it down.
The Web Jizeb.
She's the destroyer. You need to hurry. And he's like, look, I know what I'm doing here. We can't push it too hard because if we do, she'll activate, and then we won't learn where the rest of them are, and we won't be able to eliminate them from the universe. And she full on like chokes him up against the wall and forces him to really say like, look, what is this thing? This isn't your girlfriend. You're here on a mission. You need to recognize the seriousness, the gravity of what's going on here.
Yeah. And she raises that same thing we talked about before. It basically says, she may seem like a naive young woman, but she's acting out on a mission here. She's here for a reason. This isn't, she's not an ingenue. She's smart, and she's doing stuff that shows she's smart.
Yeah, and I would guess just given that she's synthetic, one might wonder if subconsciously she's being driven by some grand master plan that she may not be aware of, that she's just a puppet for. Yeah. Then we get some pew 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 as the old school Romulan Bird-of-Prey in all its HD glory attacks La Sirena. And Tim, I'm kind of wondering, since you saw the original run of TOS, what were your feels when you saw this?
It was interesting. I think the Romulan Bird-of-Prey is, I think, one of the first first alien ships that Kirk has a battle with in the original series. Like, I don't know if you remember the series where the guy who played Sarek plays a Romulan commander, and Kirk and him have a sort of Moby Dick chasing each other through. They do like a cop chase through on this episode, and Kirk's trying to chase them down, and he ends up destroying their ship, but it's a bird of prey that he's chasing, like in the Enterprise, right? So that goes back a ways. And I do remember when I was a kid, I had a Klingon, the Klingon, not the bird of prey. What was the Klingon ship before the bird of prey? I had one of those models. Huh?
The D7 with the long skinny neck.
Yeah, those sort of
like
bulb
a
on the
triangle
end
body.
of it. Yeah. So I had one of those as a model because I couldn't get an Enterprise one, but I think I might have enjoyed the bird of prey one because it had the Roman eagle on the side as well, right? So I have to go back and watch that episode. I wasn't really paying attention. I did notice it did definitely look like a bird of prey. It was very familiar to me, but again the high res glory kind of threw me off too, right? So. And how they laser the wing off too, or the nacelle on the side.
Yeah, it was, to my eyes, it seemed very faithful. It seemed very similar to the way the USS Enterprise was shown in Disco, where you can tell the shape is, the basics are the same, but it's been updated with modern sort of textures that you would put on
I did notice it did
CGI.
look a lot bigger than I might have imagined it would be in real life, right? Like, I always thought a Bird of Prey was a sort of small, sort of Viper kind of class ship, but there's one scene where it's sort of flying over top of them, and you see in scale how big it is. It's kind of like, it looks like it's got a round section, which is kind of almost not quite as big as the saucer section on the original Star Enterprise, but you get the impression it's a big ship, right? I've always thought they were much more smaller and agile than that, but that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's hard to get a super sense of scale with this relative to other things, because we don't have a great sense of how big La Sirena is. It seems like it's certainly not like a runabout, but it's not as big as even like Voyager and the USS Enterprise original one. You could sort of tell the scale between that and the Romulan Bird-of-Prey, but we haven't seen any ship close to the hero ship of this series.
What was that ship they had on Deep Space Nine that was sort of a smaller ship?
The Defiant.
Defiant,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even get the impression it's that big, but
no, I think it's smaller than Defiant for sure, but it's bigger than a shuttle, right?
Yeah,
Obviously.
it'd be interesting to see if at some point they give us some sort of scale for that, because even when it was flying around the Bird of Prey, it was clearly smaller than the Bird of Prey, but still hard to get a read on exactly the dimensions.
Right, and the hero who comes into the scene, which Jaime hasn't got to yet, but that'll
come up, because what we also see is we're collecting them all, right? So there's another Captain Rios based hologram.
Well, so what I was it wasn't talking about him, but I was just saying about the ships though, because there's another ship that comes into the battle, and it's even smaller than it seems the
But I think it's supposed to be a one-person ship, right? Obviously smaller.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Right. So Rios pulls up the Spanish-speaking Emmett as the gunner, so tactical, maybe an ETH. I don't know if they stated that, but it would make sense, that a tactical hologram that's you fly and I shoot sort of thing. And
he doesn't seem to do much shooting at first, right?
Yeah, I guess it depends where the weapons are. Like, we haven't really seen like the schematic layout of the hero ship to see what it is. I mean, it seems more like like a Millennium Falcon, which I think is pretty appropriate given the way they've presented Rios to us. It seems more like that sort of class of ship versus being like an arm to the teeth USS Defiant or a flying hotel in space like the USS Enterprise D.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of unused space inside this ship, I have to say, too. It doesn't, like, I find that, that where they sit on the bridge and that whole sort of back area, like, what is that about? Like, could they not put storage stuff in there? Like, I kind of get the impression that the spaceships would be much like more confined than these ones tend to be.
It's hard to tell with this one so we see the hollow matrix thing, right? The fake Chateau Picard that it can create. We see that there's a lot of holographic crew members, so they probably don't need much quarters for crew. And it's unclear if the rest of that volume of body is for storage, shipping, smuggling.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's the ballroom or something where they have their big cotillions and stuff.
Carrying humpback whales, just in case.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
In case you never know when that'll come up.
Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot for them to play with, but I also agree with you, Tim, that it seems a lot more cavernous and open, even compared to larger ships like the Enterprise D, which was certainly very roomy, but it sort of felt like it was less roomy than this. What else we got here? Oh, so yes. So Tim, you'd mentioned the unmarked, small fighter that comes in to help, and they laser off the nacelle, part of the little wing from the Bird of Prey, and the friendly ship is damaged, and the pilot needs to be emergency beamed out, and Picard's like, "Yep, do it. Just right here." And Elnor, you be ready to stabby stab, right? Okay, cool. They beam the person over, and holy smokes! I wrote in the notes here: heads up, 7 up. 7 of 9 has joined the party.
Yeah, with a great line too. You owe me a ship, Picard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dun dun dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, I don't know if you guys see the previews for next week.
No.
I don't know.
No,
I don't think
don't
you get
spoil
the
it.
Ready Room stuff, so we'll leave that till next time.
Yeah.
Well, we can watch the Ready Room, but we have to use like a VPN tool to get onto YouTube and watch it. So, which is a pain in the butt.
Which one?
Yeah, I think you covered it up. The only thing you missed, though, there's only one detail you missed in this entire retelling of the episode.
What's that?
It was directed by Jonathan Frakes.
That's right. At the very beginning, they did in fact say Mr. Jonathan Frakes directed this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which, according to the Ready Room, meant that there was lots of laughing and jovialness because, when Picard and him get together, or Patrick Stewart and him get together, apparently it's mayhem.
Yeah. And that actually speaks a lot to the differences in style between... And it's clearly, Star Trek Picard is modern Trek in the way it's filmed, but the style is notably different than Disco. I'm pretty sure it was the Frakes... one of the Frakes directed episodes where they did this wild crane shot that was like being like on a roller coaster almost, where they like went around... up and around the crew talking about stuff. I can't remember, talking about Control probably. And this is a lot more sort of laid back and more contemplative when it comes to the way that it's filmed. So a little bit quieter.
The episode, you mean, yeah?
I had in my notes, so when... There's some good symmetry, too. So the first scene, when we flash back to 14 years ago, we see Picard beamed down into the middle of this relocation hub, and he's saying Jolan True, hello to everybody in Romulin, and everybody's come to see him, and they're really gathering against him. And then they have the scene later on where he beams back down to the planet after being away for 14 years, and obviously they're not happy to see him. And he does the exact same sort of walk through town, but now he's getting the scorn and the looks and stuff like that. It's interesting. I like the way they filmed that too. The really good symmetry between the two scenes of where we were and how he was a hero, and where we are now, where he's a pariah. And I like this, that during that scene, he's walking through town, you see one of the guys sitting at that Romulan bar, tap on his communicator badge, to sort of say, hey, you'll never guess who I just saw here. And then Rios later on says, or I think it's actually Raffi says, you're trending on Twitter and it's not good.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. It's like, oh no, people are talking snag about
Picard is going viral, and it's not in a good way.
Yeah, hashtag delete Picard, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what are our takeaways from this one? Again, a little bit of a glue episode.
Introducing a new character and sort of developing the story around him, and his relationship with Picard and his relationship with his skills. Like, how does he get to be such a ninja good fighter and loner, right? In that he was raised by the nuns who aren't supposed to have males in their area, right? And that he kind of never left the nest, as it were, right? So, which is kind of weird, but just finished his training apparently. And then, of course, we were introduced to an old character, which we all know about. But of course, she's going to have a different tone to her behavior in episodes coming up, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, I like. There was a nice moment there where Picard meets with Zani, the leader of the Kowat Malat, and says, "Are you sure you want me to take him? He could die when he goes out there." And she says, "Yeah, but he hasn't really lived yet, so he's got to go. He's got to go and live his life." I thought that was a really nice scene between the two of them.
So I guess he's like 18, 19 now. Because
I would have said he's in his early
14
20s,
years.
yeah.
He was probably like an 8 or 10-year-old kid, I guess, right?
But yeah, he definitely, it's funny because he sort of, you see them as a kid, and then she sort of says, yeah, he's a badass now. But that scene, you get that really, tight scene where Picard's in trouble and he's like, I am here. This is who I am. You don't want to mess with me. And they're like, it's fine. And then, 2 seconds later, there's, one guy's head sliding off his shoulders. It's a pretty quick sense of who this young man is and what he's capable of. I thought that was really eloquently done.
Yeah, but I think as soon as you saw the conflict going between Picard and the other Romulans, that he was going to jump in and save the day. That was coming a mile away. I don't know. Would they have been that blatantly obvious about things
What do you mean?
in the original series or in the Next Generation? Like they seem, the writing seemed to be a bit more
on the nose. Yeah,
clever.
You're right. It was a little telegraphed
Clever.
here, but then I don't know how else you could, like you got to get from point A to point B on some of this stuff too.
It's a bit like in the Lord of the Rings too. Like he's going in, or I guess the Hobbit, where he's going and forming this clan of people who are going to go help him on this mission, right? So, I hope it doesn't turn out to be like your typical trope of things like that, like where the Fellowship of the Ring or the Hobbit, where they just steal sort of plot points from those, right?
I mean, and they reference the Three Musketeers at one point earlier too, which clearly Elmore is enamored by and sort of takes a little bit of a pattern after too.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's the D'Artagnan, I guess, or maybe Picard's the D'Artagnan. Yeah.
I like the other scene that I thought was really cute was that first one between Jurati and Rios, where she sort of comes in and says, so this is it, huh? This is space. Space is boring.
Space turned out to be super boring.
And then she starts listing off all the mathematical equations for the number of planets and the number of galaxies, and she's like, actually, space is kind of the wrong name for it. Shouldn't it just be called vast quantities of stuff?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, she's cute. I really like Alison Pill. I really enjoyed her in a few different shows. I liked her on the Newsroom a lot.
And it's the existential pain of living with the consciousness of death and how it defines us as human beings.
Oh, thank you. See, I tried mightily to write it down when the commercial break comes up. What did I hear?
You can pause the show and
I could, but it ruins the timing. And I didn't have time to watch the episode twice, which maybe I will start doing if I get time. Watch it straight through and then watch it to take notes.
Yeah, I always pause it and of course I have the subtitles on because I don't like it when people mumble on TV shows. But yeah, and what they say is that when Raffi finds out that they're not going directly to Free Cloud, she finds out he wants to make a stop. She goes, he wants to make a stop?
Yeah, she gets a lot of good lines, doesn't she?
Yeah. So he's got to pick up
I
a
like
few things,
the same scene where Mr. Hospitality, the hologram, is showing Picard around the replica of his study, and when Rios comes into the room, he sort of says, beat it, basically, to the hologram. Say, hey, I effing hate that guy.
He sees Rios and just kind of
that one made me laugh.
Disappears into the ether.
Yeah. Makes you wonder now. We've seen 4 different distinctive holograms with different personalities and voices and everything. I wonder how many.
It's
more
a bit
we
like
see over the course of the series.
Harcourt French and Mud.
That's
the episode at the end where Kirk curses Mud to have multiple copies of his wife.
I had a feeling with this episode after we saw how many more of these Rios shaped holograms there were. It feels like a thing, and I don't know if the thing is normally this sort of thing, extreme narcissism, but it doesn't seem like it fits this character. And what came to mind is, I wonder if this is some sort of weird sort of sickness where he's are those accents mapped to people that he lost in whatever tragic event occurred where his captain's brains were splattered on the bulkhead. Are these crewmates that he had? There was one who sounded British and there was one who had a southern accent, and I don't know, something to keep an eye on, because this seems weird now.
Yeah, and the fact that they're casting his likeness too. I mean, obviously we've established that the holograms can be programmed to look like whatever, but it is kind of telling that he only ever wants the company of himself too.
And it did establish that he takes orders or takes directions just like a proper Starfleet
officer,
Federation lackey would, right? Because she calls him on that too, about making the stop.
No, I think. This felt like you're watching, puzzle pieces fall into place. Obviously, the first few episodes we sort of got the first 4 characters in place that get on the ship and start heading out. Now we've added these next 2 pieces in 7 of 9 and Elnor. So I think we're there, right? As far as we know from the cast list, this is sort of where we're at. This is the crew.
Yep.
And now it's the mystery of how do they get to figure out where Soji is, and
right,
and letting her know.
Well, we have to
what she is and
have a fun trip to Free Cloud now too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and we're going to run into Dr. Maddox, is it? Right?
That's right. Well, that's why they're going to Free Cloud, right?
Yeah. And he's going to be all grumpy and upset with Picard, and because he gave him a stick to play with and a book, and left him with his robots.
Yep.
All right. Well, I guess we'll tune in next week to find out what happens. Same bat time, same bat channel. So, Doctor Who, somebody wrote on here with a pink highlighter, which must be Jonathan.
My dog is acting kind of nutty. Let me go take care of that. I actually didn't see this week's Doctor Who, so I think you guys go ahead and chat about it while I deal with this dog, and I'll be back.
No, we'll skip.
I'll be back.
We'll skip. We can skip. Can we skip?
Yeah. I mean, it was a fine episode. It was nothing special.
Mm-hmm.
It was a Doctor Who episode.
Oh, this is the Boogeyman
one,
right?
The guy who haunts your dreams thing. Yeah, it was fine, but again, still, I don't get how you sort of go from like canonically important episodes into follow-up episodes. We did get a little bit this week of what the Doctor was sort of like, well, what do I do without them? And there was like a little bit of sort of seemed like some sort of existential
and some weirdness with their friends. Like last year, I've forgotten the name of the Indian girl. What's her?
Jazz.
Jasminder, yeah. So last year, her parents were with her sister, and they were nowhere to be seen in this episode. Yeah. Kind of weird, right? Were they out shopping at the time? Or something?
Yeah. They could get them back for that episode.
Yeah, and then the Ryan is his name. Ryan's best mate, that he's hanging out with. Was he ever in the show before?
I don't recall seeing him, but that's not to say, again, same thing with they obviously. Graham goes back and is playing cards with his buddies too. We don't know who the heck those guys are.
And he starts to have these weird visions and things.
Yeah. So. No, again, to me it was just like, yep, that's a Doctor Who episode. It was weird, and there was, weird space aliens who conveniently have British accents.
And the two stars or two planets colliding with the little thing in between, and that, those kind of, weird, paradoxy kind of things are normal in Doctor Who, right? And I think you kind of go from these weird sort of something weird is happening over here, and these people are like, kind of like the plots are a bit like the original series of Star Trek used to be. Like they were all, there was never any sort of overarching themes. The only time they ever had a double story was when they did the one around the cage, right? Mm-hmm. But each episode was self-contained and resolved itself within 40 minutes, right? And so Doctor Who is a lot like that, and like they have these sort of injustices that the Doctor goes and rectifies, in a matter of 40 minutes, like where peoples are repressed or whatever, in this case here it was sort of
the
discovering that the boogeyman and the Princess Peach. The Princess Peach were together in like they were playing against. I thought the vignette where they tell the story of how these two beings came into being and worked together, that was an interesting little vignette in the middle. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like last week we kind of missed it. Last week they were talking about the microplastics that are in all of us, right? Mm-hmm. And how the plastic is destroying the planet, and it's this virus is attracted to plastic for some reason. Maybe it could help clean up the plastic. I don't know, but. So last week's was a sort of environmental one. 2 weeks ago 3 weeks ago was an environmental one. So they have these sort of, but then they have these interesting characters like the Judoon army was kind of cool, right?
Yeah, and
they may come.
In typical Doctor Who fashion too, like the best part of the Adventures in Time and Space is that you can do anything. That's the absolute winning formula of Doctor Who is you can go anywhere, you can be anywhere. Right. It could be an alien story one week and a horror story the next week, and you can kind of do everything. So this week was sort of a little bit horror-y, a little bit sci-fi-y. Mm-hmm. Next week, I think they're going to do a Mary Shelley episode.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. It's interesting that like so Matt Smith and David Tennant and Eccleston and even Capaldi would have by now they would have had a Dalek episode. They would have had, although I think the Dalek got eradicated by David Tennant's Doctor.
Yeah.
Or in the Day of the Doctor, maybe I'm thinking, right? But they would have had the Cybermen at some point. Although Bill and the Cybermen I think Bill kind of ended the Cybermen by becoming a good Cyberman, right? And then what else is there? So there's like the usual, the Screaming Angels, right? This episode was a bit like that.
And the Master, of course.
Yeah, and the Master, and then the other one is the big silent guys. The what are they called? The Silence or something like that, or the Horror, if they have a name. Where you don't look behind you, because if you look behind you, you'll see them, and they have a name in particular. But and then they also have those people at it's not MI5 or MI6, is it?
There's like the whole spy thing.
Yeah, the British with, right? The British secret government agency people, right, that they run. And there's in that one there's like a lizard lady. There's I think Jenna Coleman was involved with those guys too, right, at one point. But so there's a lot of like recurring characters, but it seems like this new Doctor seems to want to move away from all that kind of stuff. Although John Barrowman kind of did hint about a Cyberman coming, right?
Yeah, and they've already said that. So we talked about it, I think, a little bit last week. So there's 10 episodes this season. This was episode 7. Next week is Mary Shelley. That's 8, and then
But it's actually Mary Shelley. You weren't being facetious.
Oh, I'm not being facetious. She says, "I think I see a Frankenstein thing," and they've already shown in the preview for next week's episode at the end of this week on CTV Sci-Fi. They showed the teaser that they are in fact doing a Mary Shelley episode. So, next week's sort of a horror-y thing, and then they've already said that the last 2 episodes of the season are going to be Cybermen centric and sort of tie back into some of the stuff that we got into in episode 5. So. It's been kind of a quick season, and not a terrible season, but also sort of a little bit of an inconsistency.
Well, it's a new showrunner, right? Like the last 2 years.
Yep, Christian Nolan. Yeah, so I guess it's to be expected that there's some changes and stuff like that. Although again, like I don't think I'll be.
And then Jodie Whittaker I think she's starting to own the Doctor. Right?
I like her. I really do. I find her very, very charming.
And you're right about the Yorkshire accents. They're
really really are. All of their Yorkshire accents are. Hers is by far the best. Again, I just want to sit and listen to her talk. But she's been really, really charming, and I'm really warming to Graham as a character. I wasn't quite sure what to make of him during his first season last year.
Well, as an actor, he's in the Law and Order UK. So he's a fine
Jamie
actor. Bamber. You remember Jamie Bamber, who played
Starbuck
from Battlestar Galactica?
No, Starbuck. Apollo.
Apollo, yeah, he played Apollo. So after he left Battlestar Galactica, he went and he was in Law and Order and they were partners. They were like the cops, right? Yeah. And again, it was interesting to see the whole, British police and British penal system or judicial system working compared to like how we have it here in Canada, or probably closer to Canada.
Yeah, I think it's
and how it is in the United States, right? So that was an interesting show, and that's where I first saw that particular actor, right? So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, it's Doctor Who. It's always been sort of weird.
Yeah, no, and that's again, I think it's actually a hallmark of the show that some episodes are almost like they're campy, right? Like they can really
they're ridiculous.
They can be almost nonsensical, and I don't think that's like
it's quite different. It's quite different than the shows in the. I mean, they're closer now. These 2 Doctors or last 3 Doctors are closer to Tom Baker and John Pertwee's Doctors, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the ridiculous, plot lines and the fact that they just sort of seem to know everything all the time,
Mm-hmm. I did like the Doctor had a great line in this most recent episode. She says, I think it's Graham says to him, aren't you supposed to have a plan? And she says, my head is full of plans. I'm just fishing around for the right one.
yeah. That was good.
So it was a very, very Doctor statement.
Yes, I was a very good threw line. It in the chat, but I guess you guys didn't see it. I didn't want to interrupt because I didn't see the episode, so I didn't.
Sorry, I hope we didn't spoil too much for you, buddy.
No, it's fine.
It was.
I don't think we didn't spoil very much. We didn't talk about the show.
We were more talking about our overall impressions of the season so far, and
so
only 3 more episodes to go. We got a preview for next week's episode, so it just seems like another sort of episode for a self-contained story, and then the 2-parter to finish.
But Jaime's very respectful. Like he does this with Mark and myself, because Mark and I will get on the call early.
Apparently Siri wanted to weigh in on this one.
So that happens too a lot, but. Mark and I'll be chatting away on some subject or whatever, and then we'll kind of wonder where Jaime is, and he's like, "Oh, I've been here the whole time."
You can hear the ding when I come in. And if you're in the middle of a conversation,
just don't turn your back.
I don't want to disrupt it.
He's like the Screaming Angels. Jaime is. You'll have to go watch.
He who lurks in Seattle.
You'll have to go watch some vintage Doctor Who to get the gist of that.
Those are some of the best episodes.
Alrighty, let's.
So those are some of the best episodes. The Screaming Angels.
Yeah. And the big. I can't remember what the name of those guys are. The big tall black. They wear like a tuxedo and really sort of alien shaped.
Yeah, they're like Slender Man guys.
9 feet tall. Yeah, Slender Man. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're kind of creepy too. The Horror, I think they're called, or something like that. Anyway,
I sense something for next week's.
Pretty much. All right, so let's hit the watch list, shall we? Jaime, you're up first.
Yeah, this one. Let me set the mood for you. So we had to wait forever to see the ultimate team up of a movie with Jackie Chan and Jet Li, and we've waited even longer for this next ultimate team up. Jackie Chan and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
What?
in the Iron Mask. So in my pick of the week for the watch list is the trailer for the Iron Mask, which has Arnold Schwarzenegger hamming it up as as what I assume is like a British soldier of some sort. Jackie Chan is involved in kung fu-y type business. There is a lady with a dragon. It's not Daenerys. This is a Chinese style dragon. And I have no idea what's going on. It is apparently a sequel to a 2014 Russian horror fantasy film called The Forbidden Kingdom, aka V or Vi 3D or Forbidden Empire. So the Iron Mask.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah,
that.
It looks so nutty. And I think it's worth watching the trailer at the very least.
Okay.
Yeah, that's very weird.
I can't find this Doctor Who villain, so we'll move on to Jonathan's thing.
All right. My pick for this week, something that's sort of been on my radar for a few weeks since it came out. So Netflix has done an adaptation of Locke and Key, which was a comic book series from about a decade back. About a family whose father is murdered. So it's a wife and 3 kids. The dad is killed, and they are forced to move into his family estate in Massachusetts. And they quickly discover that in this place that there are these basically doors that are portals. And the portals, take them to different places, but they have to go throughout and find these missing keys. Meanwhile, there is obviously a nemesis that is trying to stop them as they go through it. I'm keen. I've seen some of the reviews so far, and they're sort of a little sort of back and forth. Some of them seem like positive, and some said, it's not quite as fun as the book, but either way, I think I might check out the first couple episodes and sort of see if it's enough to hook me in. But it looks interesting. A little horror-y, a little sci-fi-y, and I think the hope was that this was going to be sort of a new sort of Stranger Things, get some buzz behind it thing, and that hasn't happened so far. So take a look and see what it's like.
So,
are you still trying to find out your character?
Yeah, no, it's the silence.
The silence.
The silence. Yes, it's the silence. So I don't really have a watch list item this week, but I did mention, I think on this show or maybe the other show, More Than Just Code, I talked about something I've been watching on Apple TV. Since I've run out of shows on Apple TV to watch, there are some that I'm just not really interested in, but there's one I stumbled across or saw some trailers for and started watching. It's called Little America, and each episode is a story about somebody who comes to America and through whatever reason has sort of an interesting story, and they're all based on true stories. So the first one's about a little kid who is with his parents, and they run a motel, and the parents I'm not sure if he's born in America or whatever, but his parents are deported back to India, and they have to go and reapply to come back to the United States, which is happens a lot. But they leave the little kid as like a 10-year-old kid running the motel.
Oh, I've seen the trailer for this. This looks
so
really funny.
Yeah, so he runs the motel until his parents come back as an adult. So so it's funny. It's sort of a Home Alone 2 kind of thing. They leave him with a friend who really couldn't care about running the motel, but the kid, goes through sort of a bit of adventure. Ends up they still run the motel, and his parents do come back eventually, right? Another episode is about a young African man who ends up he's in a college or a university, and he's kind of annoying, and the professor of the class, he's intelligent, he's one of the most intelligent people in the class, but he's just an odd duck, doesn't fit in. This is somewhere in the South, right? And so he sees one of the cool students with big 10-gallon hat and boots, and he decides he's told by somebody he needs to sort of try and fit in, right? So he goes and gets himself a cowboy hat and boots and stuff like that, and he ends up getting the position he wants to get. He's trying to apply for a TA position with this professor. So that's an interesting story. Fun sort of story how he tells how he relates to his family and stuff like that. Sort of all in his head sort of thing, but. He communicates with his family at home. His plan was to go back, make some money and then go back home and help the family run the family business. But of course, it's Africa that falls apart, right? And the last one I just watched was a really interesting one about a woman in a commune who come, one of those things where you go and there's like a Zen Buddhist leader, and they're in this commune for a week or two and they can't say a word, right? And it's all about how she's, sort of like probably feeling like the rest of us and just not quite fitting into this whole sort of sitting there and meditating for 4 hours at a time kind of thing, right? And not saying a word to people. And, there's a lot of interest in that story and all that kind of stuff. So that's a fun story. But so they're kind of catchy, internationally kind of flavored stories. So I'm not sure if there's probably like 8 or 10 of them, I guess. So I'm just working my way through them. They're pretty interesting, and they're called Little America.
And the whole thing's an anthology.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. Yes, little different stories and stuff like that. Yeah, with typical,
cool.
Apple. I don't know if it's typical Apple, but it's sort of Apple, sort of very flavorish to it. There's nothing, there's no pew pew and all that kind of stuff, but still, they're interesting stories. Alrighty, well, I guess that's it for another week. So, Jonathan, if people want to get in touch with you, where would they go?
I'm on Instagram and on Twitter at JPG News.
All right, and Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you.
I'm on Twitter as @DevWithAHair.
Alrighty, and my name is Timitra, Timmitra. On the Twitter machine is where you'll find me. So until next time, we'll see you in the future.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to the Spockcast podcast. This is Jean-Luc Picard. Shut up, Wesley. Sorry, say again. Just the tag. Gotcha. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spockcast website at spockcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spockcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpockcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spockcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spockcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
Nobody ever says live long and prosper. Come on.
Live long and try and keep your head on your shoulders, kids.
Yeah, keep your head on your shoulders. Exactly. Yep.
I regret your decision.
You may regret your decision, yes. That's the story of many people's lives. Alrighty. Well, I guess that's it.
That's it.
That's all.
Done.
Beans. Till next time.
Yeah, I think it's
Who's
Tim's
up
turn.
next time?
I guess
for
it would
the-
be me.
The notes. I forgot the order.
You.
Cool. Take copious notes. I'll try to do the same to fill in color commentary.
Somebody chatting with me? I didn't see a chat here. Oh, everybody back. Oh, that's you. Okay, sorry. I wasn't looking at the screen. Alrighty.
All right.
Talk to you
See you
later.
guys.
Bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.